Hello and welcome to Wrestler Spotlight. I'm the Maritime Warrior, and this week's episode will be about one of the early faces of Maritime Wrestling, Freddie Sweetan. Born Fred Prosser, he would get his start in professional wrestling after meeting Paul Peller. Paul Peller is the one that persuaded Freddie Prosser to join professional wrestling. After being trained by Emile Dupree, he would make his debut in 1968 for Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. In Stampede Wrestling, he would be put in a tag team with Paul Peller, and they would be given the name The Butchers. As The Butchers, they would both be masked wrestlers. The big rivalry that they would have in Calgary as The Butchers would be with Bob Luke and Emile Dupree. Freddie Prosser was from Shenstone, New Brunswick in the Maritimes, so it would just make sense for him to come wrestle to the Maritimes. The first promotion that he would work for in the Maritimes was Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. Freddie Prosser and Paul Peller would bring the Butcher's gimmick to Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. On that first tour of Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, they would face such names as Leo Burke, Rudy Kay, Emile Dupree, and Rocky Johnson. Prosser would return to Stampede Wrestling in 1969. He would continue to wrestle as Butcher No. 1 and start teaming with Bob Sweetan. Prosser would then drop the Butcher gimmick and become the kayfabe brother of Bob Sweetan, adopting the name Freddie Sweetan. That year in Calgary, Freddie Sweetan would wrestle such names as Leo Burke, Ox Baker, and Angelo Mosca. Bob and Freddie Sweetan would even win the Stampede International Tag Team titles after they defeated Bud and Ray the Osborne brothers. They would continue to feud with the Osborne brothers and eventually lose the tag team titles back to them. In May of 1969, Freddie Sweetan would return to the Maritime Territories. He would go back to Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling and go back to the Butcher gimmick. Another wrestling promotion was about to get started and be competition for Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling in the Maritimes. This would be Eastern Sports Association's International Wrestling. At least for a little while in 1969, Freddie Sweetan was working both Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling as The Butcher and working International Wrestling as Freddie Sweetan. Freddie Sweetan would eventually choose Al Zink and Rudy Kay's International Wrestling over Emile Dupree's Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. Reasons for choosing International over Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling might be some of the bigger names were in International, like the Cormier brothers. This is Leo Burke, The Beast, Rudy Kay, and Bobby Kay. By 1970, International Wrestling was on television, and International would eventually be an NWA territory. That first season of International Wrestling, Freddie Sweetan would face such stars as the Cormier brothers, Ox Baker, Vic Rosatani, former boxer Yvon Durel, and the Stomper Archie Goldie. That season, he would even team up with the Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Don Kent. Once that first season of ESA ended, Freddie Sweetan would join his partner Bob Sweetan in Central States Wrestling. Central States was based out of Kansas City, and Bob Sweetan and Freddie Sweetan would get name changes for their time in Central States. Freddie Sweetan would be given the name of Killer Cox, and Bob Sweetan would be given the name KO Cox. Freddie would make it to the finals of the NWA Central States Heavyweight Championship Tournament, but would lose to Danny Littlebear. Freddie Sweetan would stay with Central States Wrestling until April of 1970. During that time period, he would also wrestle in St. Louis, facing Dory Funk Jr. In May, he would return to ESA in the Maritimes. He would continue that schedule for the rest of his career, working the Maritimes in the summers and finding a new territory for the winter times. ESA started back up in 1970, and Freddie started teaming up with Eric Pomeroy. Freddie was replacing Pomeroy's old tag team partner, Phil Robley. Pomeroy and Robley were the international tag team champions at the time, So when Freddie replaced Robley, he took over as one half of the International Tag Team Champions. This would be Freddie Sweetan's first of many International Tag Team title reigns. Freddie Sweetan and Eric Pomeroy would be International Tag Team Champions from July 13th to September 28th before losing the titles to The Beast and Archie Goldie. Sweetan and Pomeroy's reign lasted 77 days. In October, the ESA season would come to an end and Freddie Sweetan would return to Central States Wrestling. He would wrestle for Central States Wrestling from November 1970 to January of 1971. In January of 1971, he would return to St. Louis to face Dewey Robertson. After that, he would start wrestling for Western States Wrestling under the name Butcher Brower. He would even team up with fellow Maritimer, The Beast. He would even win the Western States Tag Team titles with The Beast. In May of 1971, he would return to ESA for their summer season. On July 16, 1971, Freddie Sweetan and Eric Pomeroy would win the vacant ESA International Tag Team titles after beating Abe Jacobs and The Beast. They would defend the International Tag Team titles versus teams like Abe Jacobs and The Beast, Archie Goldie and Rudy Kay, Archie Goldie and The Beast, and Archie Goldie and Leo Burke. They would eventually lose the International Tag Team titles to Archie Goldie and The Beast. This would end their second reign as International Tag Team Champions at 38 days. On September 5th, 1971, Freddie Sweetan and Eric Pomeroy would win back the International Tag Team titles from Archie Goldie and The Beast, starting their third reign as International Tag Team Champions. They would lose the International Tag Team titles on October 12th to The Beast and Rudy Kay, ending their third reign at 37 days. By the end of the 1971 ESA season, Freddie Sweetan is feuding with The Beast and are having chain matches. In November of 1971, Freddie Sweetan would start wrestling for IWA Montreal out of Quebec. He would wrestle IWA Montreal's top star Jacques Rougeau Sr., and even challenge Carlos Roca for the Montreal World Heavyweight title. Freddie Sweetan would remain with IWA until he would return to the Maritimes in May of 1972. In 1972, he would start up a new tag team with Mike the Judge Dubois. They would start challenging The Beast and Rudy Kay for the International Tag Team titles until finally winning them on May 16th. They would continue to feud with Rudy Kay and The Beast, and Freddie Sweetan would even have another chain match with The Beast. But on June 1st, they would lose the International Tag Team titles back to The Beast and Rudy Kay, ending their reign at 16 days. Only 4 days after losing the titles, Freddie Sweetan and Mike the Judge Dubois would win back the ESA International Tag Team titles from The Beast and Rudy Kay. Sweetan and Dubois would start feuding with Leo Burke and Bobby Kay and would have some penalty box matches with them. Sweetan and Dubois would also defend their titles versus Leo Burke and Johnny Weaver and The Beast and Bobby Kay. They would lose the International Tag Team Championships on August 8th, 1972 to Leo Burke and Bobby Kay, ending their reign at 65 days. Sweetan would also start teaming with Earl Black. This new pairing would challenge for the International Tag Team Championships, and they would also face Billy and Benny the Maguire twins. In October, Freddie Sweetan would challenge The Beast for the NWA North American Heavyweight title unsuccessfully. He would also challenge Leo Burke and Bobby Kay for the international tag team titles with new partner Killer Karl Krupp, but once again it was unsuccessful. In November of 1972, Freddie Sweetan and Mike Dubois would go to Jim Crockett Promotions in Charlotte, North Carolina. They would even face the team of Bobby Kay and Terry Kay. Terry Kay was Leo Burke. The 1973 ESA season would start in April, and this year Freddie Sweetan would start teaming up with Mad Dog Martel to challenge for the ESA International Tag Team titles versus Leo Burke and Bobby Kay. After being unsuccessful with Mad Dog Martel, Freddie Sweetan would find a new tag team partner to challenge Leo Burke and Bobby Kay. This new tag team partner was Kurt Von Steiger. Sweetan and Von Steiger would win the International Tag Team titles on June 5th, 1973. They would eventually lose the International Tag Team titles to The Beast and Bobby Kay, ending their reign at 34 days. A few weeks later, on July 31st, 1973, Freddie Sweetan and new tag team partner Mr. X would win the International Tag Team titles. They beat The Beast and Bobby Kay to win the International Tag Team titles. On August 14th, 1973, The Beast and Bobby Kay would win back the titles, ending their reign at 14 days. Later on in the 1973 season, Freddie Sweetan would win the International Tag Team titles once again, this time with new partner Nature Boy Dillon. Yes, the future manager of the Four Horsemen, J.J. Dillon. They won the titles on September 24th, 1973, beating The Beast and Bobby Kay, and they would end the 1973 season as champions. The titles would be vacated by the start of the 1974 season. In early 1974, Freddie Sweetan would return to IWA Montreal and then would make his way to Ontario for Maple Leaf Wrestling, and in Maple Leaf Wrestling he would wrestle Jacques Rougeau Sr. The 1974 ESA season would start in April, and on May 7th, Freddie Sweetan would once again team up with Mike the Judge Dubois to win the vacant ESA International Tag Team titles. They won the International Tag Team titles by beating The Beast and Bobby Kay. They would lose the International Tag Team titles to The Beast and Leo Burke. Their reign would end on June 22nd, 1974, ending their reign at 46 days. On June 28th, 1974, Freddie Sweetan and Mike Dubois would win back the International Tag Team titles from The Beast and Leo Burke. But Sweetan and Dubois would quickly lose them back to The Beast and Leo Burke on July 13th, ending their reign at 15 days. The world had no idea that this would be Freddie Sweetan's final title reign in his wrestling career. Freddie Sweetan and Mike the Judge Dubois would challenge Leo Burke and The Beast at the York Arena in Fredericton, New Brunswick on July 25th, 1974. July 25th was Freddie Sweetan's 36th birthday. After the show, Freddie Sweetan was going to have a party to celebrate his 36th birthday at his cabin in McFairlane Bridge. It is unknown how it happened, but Freddie Sweetan's cabin burned to the ground, taking Freddie Sweetan's life. Many rumors have floated around on how he died. Some say he fell asleep with a cigar or a cigarette still burning, and that's the cause of the fire. Some say that his charcoal barbecue fell over and that started the fire. Some have even claimed that Freddie Sweetan had a bullet in his head. Some claim that he committed suicide and that's why he had a bullet in his head. Some have even claimed that he was murdered. but it is most likely that he died from smoke inhalation. One of the biggest questions I've always had about Freddie Sweetan is if he never dies in July of 1974, what does his career look like going forward? I think he keeps doing the same schedule of doing ESA in the summers and finding a territory for the winters. I think he follows the Cormiers to Trans-Canada Wrestling in 1977, and once that ends, I think he follows the Cormiers to Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. I think in Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, he probably continues to be a tag team specialist and wins the North American tag team titles numerous times. I think he probably wrestles until the early 1990s and then retires. But that's just fantasy booking on my part. Freddie Sweetan held the ESA International Tag Team titles 10 times from 1970 to 1974. During that time period, he held the International Tag Team titles at least once a year, and that to me is Freddie Sweetan's legacy. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you next week.